Hello, everybody. This is another empowering democracy show, and specifically a Dump the Corruption show. And here's where we are now in our presentation of Dump the Corruption issues. Uh, we have now shown that a wide variety of people, specifically hundreds of House members, and also 30 members of the Senate, have all failed to pass a litmus test that's based on the rule. The rule that we devised to test people, we will display in just a moment. Okay, there it is. You should be seeing it on your screens now. I don't know what's happened to the rule. Okay, I thought it was on, but let me stop sharing it again. Okay, let me try to share it again. Let me try to share me. There I am. Okay, let me try to do this again because it kind of screwed up. There it is. Again, you should be seeing it now. There it is. The rule: vote against every candidate except those who won't take money from wealthy corporations, individuals, political action committees, PACs, that is, or party committees, and who repudiate all super PAC support. So that's the rule. We've applied a litmus test based on that rule, as I said, to hundreds, of House members and 30 members of the Senate. We've applied it to progressives and conservatives alike, to left wingers and right wingers, alike, and centrists. And every single one of the office holders has failed to pass the litmus test. In particular, it seems
this is a 71-year-old heart. Look closely.
It seems to be institutionalized very plainly that even more than taking PAC money, that huge quantities of money are raised from wealthy individuals, individual contributions exceeding $200 are very institutionalized in the political system. And contributions like that have a great influence, on outcomes. Sometimes where races are tight, super PAC support becomes vital and swings races from early favorites to later people who become the winners because millions of dollars are introduced into races at the last minute, both primary races and general election races. The spending has been astonishing as we've recorded it. Uh, so, just on the basis of the general rule for voting, neither office holders nor challengers uh, should be voted for if they're taking any of the big money. But to strengthen the case for acting this way, it will be very useful and very important to begin going over individual cases in some depth to try to tie the contributions that are made, the donor money that enters the races, to the specific things, the specific actions that the congressmen and senators have taken. Now I'm going to let in my good friend, Dee Pierce, who is host of the series Around the World with Dee and Friends.
Yes, and you're one of the good friends that's always on the show.
Thank you.
And we have great conversations.
Yeah, we just had another great one tonight concerning Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
and concerning also NATO. And I recommend that you go see the one, see that one. There were a lot of interesting things in it, like the introduction of the distinction between the arrogant powers and the non-arrogant powers. That was very good.
Yes.
Okay, and then also, uh, a very, very trenchant article on what's really going on in Ukraine that we had a wonderful discussion about. Okay, so I recommend that you take some time and you take in the Around the World with Dee and Friends show for tonight. Uh, the people coming on that show, specifically Dee, Kay, and I, okay, and Madeline Hoffman, have been increasingly coming together to produce what I think is a very entertaining show,
Mm-hmm.
full of facts and full of analysis and full of fun as well.
Yes, it is. Some of the stuff is just mind blowing when you read it, especially when we did the one on besmutridge.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was yesterday was DeSantis. We call it the smutridge.
yeah, we did enjoy that.
Yes.
Anyway, Kay says, hi all. And Kay says, Schumer won pass, Kay. We already covered Schumer, okay, in our analyses of the Senate, and he didn't pass. So it's not so much that we're testing him for whether he passes or not. But tonight, what we're trying to do here is go much more deeply into his actions so that people can understand better the relationship between the contributions he takes and his actions over quite a long period, okay, of time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first of many case studies that we're going to be doing because we're having these shows twice a week. And basically, for the rest of this year, twice a week, we're going to be doing case studies of senators and House people in detail to show you the relationship between the money coming in and the actions going out. So I think that ought to be quite interesting. So here we go. We're going to start with Chuck Schumer uh, by going to his his fundraising page on Open Secrets again. A different fundraising page this time. Okay. Not so much the 2022 contest, but a more general look at his campaign financing. So here is Charles Ellis Schumer. Charles E. Schumer.
Chucky.
Yeah, little Chucky Schmucky, as one very famous wag put it. Uh, he's on the Rules and Administration Committee of the Senate, and he's also the majority leader. His top industry from 2017 to 2022 was securities and investments. He raised in those 6 years $4.6 million from that industry. Okay, securities, okay, and investments, which is one of the reasons why he's known as the senator from Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
In the 2022, campaign committee fundraising from 2017 to 2022, that of course does not include uh, external spending, okay, in his favor. Uh, he raised $41.1 million, spent $41.9, almost $42 million, and had cash on hand at the end of 2022, $9.8 million. His top contributors from 2017 to 2022 were Democracy Engine, $328,480. Excuse me, the type is a little dim here, so I'm gonna raise the resolution somewhat, so this is easier to read, especially since I'm sharing the page. I think
It's still there. No, it's still here. Common Dreams.
No, this wasn't a Common Dreams page. I was intending to share. This was an Open Secrets page.
Okay.
And I had been sharing that, but I just lost it, okay, inadvertently. So let me get it back again and we'll start. Where was that Open Secrets page? Yep. Okay, here it is, the campaign finance summary. I've got to get that back in, I think. Uh, there we go. So there's his federal fundraising page, federal congressional candidacy from Open Secrets. So his top contributors from 2017 to 2022 were Democracy Engine, 328,000. That all came from individuals. Next Era Energy, I don't even know what that is. I guess it could be an oil, a fossil fuel association or something. $302,600, 298,000 from individuals, 5,000 from PACs, from the Blackstone Group, which I guess has its own PAC. 277,000, okay, from individuals. Paul Weiss, okay, et al. Guess that's a law firm. 224,000 from Alphabet. That's Google, of course. 186,000 from individuals. 5,000 from PACs. Here are top industries from 2017 to 2022. We have securities and investments, 4.6 million, 4.5 million from individuals, 164,000 from PACs, lawyers and law firms, 2.8 million from individuals, 264,000 from PACs. The retired industry, 2.6 million from individuals. From the real estate industry, 2.3 million, 2.2 from individuals, 105,000 from PACs. Also, electronics, manufacturing and equipment, 923,000 altogether, 809,000, 810,000 really, and 100 from individuals and 114,000 from PACs. The average raised by Senate members, of course, it's in the millions. 2, 3, 4 million. The average raised by Senate members in 2022 who were running for the Senate was nearly $10 million. Chuck Schumer raised $37.26 million for his campaign committee, just about 4 times the average. Sources of funds for his campaign committee: large individual contributions, $32 million. Small individual contributions, $4.6 million. PAC contributions, $4 million. Other contributions, $429,000. So the heavy majority of his funds came from large individual contributions, 78.01%. So you might ask, how does a senator get so many large individual contributions? He gets it because he has a money-raising machine, constantly soliciting contributions from wealthy and well-off individuals. Okay, the ratio of his large individual contributions to small individual contributions is 8 to 1. It's also 8 to 1 to his PAC contributions, which are at the same level as his small individual contributions. But we have to dig into this more deeply. So look at some of the other tabs. There's an elections tab here. That shows figures that are a little different. What I think is interesting is that in 2004, it looks like he raised about $28 million, $27.47 million. In 2010, he raised $19.5 million. In 2016, he raised $24.9 million. He became the majority leader in 2017, Harry Reid retired, and Schumer was his successor. And so in 2022, when Chuck had to run again, he raised $41.2 million. Is this raised or spent? Sorry. Totals raised slash spent, incumbent versus opponent. So you can see in all of these races, his opponent had very little money and no chance to win. His opponent was always dwarfed, like in 2004, $632,000 to Schumer's $28 million. In 2010, only $219,000. In 2016, $736,000. And in 2022, his opponent raised only $592,000. It might be interesting to know that Schumer's majorities have been declining over time. Uh, and in 2022, he got only 56% of the vote, despite of the fact that his chief opponent had only $592,000 raised compared to his $41 million. Kind of makes you think he's getting weaker over time, right? That people are getting less and less likely to support him as time goes by. So that election tab is interesting. Let's go to the industries tab here. He was a top recipient from the following industries. Now, we have to clarify that. Okay, this is not about who gave him the most money. Okay, it's about going industry by industry. Which industries was he the top recipient of campaign funds? The air transport industry, the airlines industry, the alternate energy production and services industry. He had the top contribution of any candidate from all these industries: beer, wine, and liquor, clothing and accessories, defense, aerospace, defense electronics, electric utilities, finance credit, general contractors, health services, hedge funds, lobbyists, lodging and tourism, okay, from marijuana industry, mortgage bankers and brokers, private equity and investment firms, pro-Israel and securities and investments, and telecom services, textiles, accountants, cable and satellite TV production, commercial banks. Oh, starting with accountants, he was the number 2 recipient. So accountants, cable and satellite TV production, commercial banks, also electronics, manufacturing and equipment, gay and lesbian rights and issues, hospitals and nursing homes, lawyers and law firms, miscellaneous finance, real estate, sugarcane and sugar beets, venture capital, gun control. And then he was the number 3 recipient in insurance, in internet, and in TV, movies, and music. And the top 20 industries contributing to his campaign committee: securities and investments, lawyers and law firms, retired, real estate, electronic manufacturing and equipment, TV, movies, and music, health professionals, lobbyists, hospitals, nursing homes, health services, HMOs, insurance. Uh, all of these, Okay, over a few elections between 2017 and 2022. Uh, okay, the lowest of these was the insurance industry, which got very close to $700,000 being sent in. All the other top industries were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Notable here is pro-Israel, 546,000. Pharmaceuticals and health products, 409,000. Education, 467,000. So his base of financial support is very, very broad. Lots and lots of industries here. He was the number one, number two, and number three contributor to a huge number, okay, of industries. In other words, they were the leading contributor. He was the leading contributor of those industries. Sorry, gotta frame it right. Uh, so the next set of statistics deals with the sector totals for major industries. Okay, agribusiness almost 400,000, communications and electronics 2.9 million, energy and natural resources 758,000. The fire sector $9.4 million. There is the senator from Wall Street, right there. Health industries, $2.8 million. Lawyers and lobbyists, $3.8 million. The ideological single issue groups, $2.0 million. And other groups, $3.7 million. Percent of his contributions that were categorized is 83.7%. Uncategorized was 16.30%. And there are PACs. Of course, his PACs were not as important as those contributions from individuals. But his PAC money for 2021 and 2022 was $2.9 million. Pretty substantial. His biggest contributors by sector for 2021, 2022, the fire sector, $549,000. His PAC contribution breakdown, $2.4 million from business, 317,000 from the ideological groups, and 308,000 from labor. So the labor contributions were outnumbered by a ratio of 8 to 1, actually more than 8 to 1, compared to the business contributions. So you can see where he's at in terms of the contributions. See what the contributors tab tells us. His leadership pack, okay, was Impact. That gave him $29.2 million during this period. The contributors to the leadership pack were Democracy Engine, Next Year Energy, Blackstone Group. I've actually recounted these groups before. They went into Schumer both as individuals and through the PACs. Those were the top 20 contributors to the campaign committee. But the leadership PAC raised $29.2 million, I guess. Okay, let's go now to Schumer's his Wikipedia page. Okay, am I sharing his Wikipedia page now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
He's still on the federal congressional candidacy.
Thanks. So now I will share his Wikipedia page, and we'll go through that, keeping in mind the contributions. So here we are. There, of course, okay, his early background. When he first was elected to Congress, he was elected from a very lefty district. His predecessor in that district was Elizabeth Holtzman, who was known as a very, very lefty Democrat at that time. Of course, the terminology at that time, which was at the end of the 1970s, uh, they were Democratic liberals, they were Republicans, and they were conservatives, okay, among the Republicans, basically Goldwater followers. The terminology progressive wasn't often used at that time. The lefties were known, okay, as the liberals, and actually they were more lefty than many of the progressives are today. They were not exactly socialist, but some of them would acknowledge that they were pretty close to being socialist. In fact, in 1972, John Kenneth Galbraith, in his Economics and Public Purpose, if I recall correctly, he admitted to being a socialist. Okay, Schumer, okay, is Jewish, and just to be clear about it, he is the first Senate Majority Leader who's Jewish. There were lots of Jewish senators before him, but he was the first one to get into the leadership. Okay, in 1980, 16th District Congresswoman Elizabeth Holtzman, who, by the way, was one great congresswoman, uh, decided that she wanted to step up to the Senate. She won, okay, the Democratic nomination for the Senate seat of Republican Jacob Javits, also known as Jack Javits. He was what was known as a liberal Republican at that time, and he was in fact, okay, a liberal. That is not to say he was not a neoliberal. Okay, he was a liberal who was in favor of government intervention where he thought it was appropriate. Uh, he was a liberal in many of the common ways at that time. Okay, when he was elected, there were still Republicans who were liberal, and so he became the senator for a number of times. I forget, maybe reelected 4 times or 5 times or something like that. He'd been the senator from New York as a Republican for quite a long time. So Holtzman tried to beat him. I forget if she did, okay, or whether someone else beat Holtzman. But anyway, Schumer ran for her vacated House seat in 1980, and he won. So that district was a very lefty district. He was reelected from the Brooklyn and Queens based district, which changed numbers twice in his tenure. It was numbered the 16th from 1981 to 1983, the 10th from 1983 to 1993, and the 9th from 1993 on. In 1982, as a result of redistricting, Schumer faced a potential matchup with Stephen Solars, who was by Schumer's mentor, and who was a popular congressman for some time. But the matchup but never materialized. In preparation, though, but Schumer, who was very afraid of this matchup, okay, that he might lose, Schumer set about making friends on Wall Street, tapping the city's top law firms and securities houses for campaign donations. Quote, I told them I looked like I had a very difficult reapportionment fight. If I were to stand a chance of being reelected, I needed some help, unquote. He would later tell the Associated Press. Uh, so Wall Street responded to him, gave him the donations, and got uh, him elected. Here's some of the legislation that Schumer supported. He introduced the Religious Freedom by Restoration Act, also known as the RFRA, on March 11th of 1993. As a member of the House Judiciary Committee, he was one of 4 members of Congress who oversaw the House investigation leading the Democratic defense of the Clinton administration, okay, of the Waco siege hearings in 1995. Okay, if you remember the Waco incident with, I forget her name. She was the Attorney General of the United States under Bill Clinton. And she carried out, okay, a siege of a religious sect, a fanatical religious sect. I forget the name of that sect now. But that incident was a bloody incident, and people were killed. And the Republicans raised a ruckus about it. And so there was a House investigation, and Schumer was leading the defense of the Clinton administration. Oh, yeah, Janet Reno. It was the name of the Attorney General involved. So in 1998, okay, on the strength of that record in the House, Schumer ran for the Senate. He won the Democratic primary with 51% of the vote. He ran against Geraldine Ferraro, who, if you recall, was the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, the first woman to run for vice president. Okay, as I recall, she was the vice presidential candidate in the 1984 run of Walter Mondale, former senator, okay, from Minnesota, and former vice president, okay, for Jimmy Carter. Okay, and Geraldine Ferrara was selected as his running mate, okay, at that time. When Schumer ran for the Senate, okay, against her, uh, he was considered the more lefty candidate of the two. I forget whether Mark Green was a lefty candidate, okay, or not. Schumer received 54% of the vote in the general election. He was defeating three-term incumbent Republican Al D'Amato, who had defeated Jack Javits, I believe, back in that 1980 primary, if I have my dates right. It was close to that. In 2004, Schumer was elected with 71% of the vote, defeating the Republican nominee, Assemblyman Howard Mills, okay, of Middletown, which is in Long Island, if I'm not mistaken. And a third candidate, the Conservative Party, specifically Marilyn F. O'Grady. There were many New York Republicans dismayed by the selection of Mills over the conservative, whose name was Michael Benjamin, who held significant advantages over Mills in both fundraising and organization. So there was a lot of fighting inside of the Republican Party and that. And the governor, George Pataki, at the time, was accused of trying to muscle Mills out of the Senate race and undermine the democratic process. But Schumer defeated Mills anyway by 2.8 million votes. He won every county in the state except for Hamilton County in the Adirondacks, least populist and most Republican county. So, Schumer was very successful. I'm going to skip quite a lot of this. He was very successful as a fundraiser because of Wall Street. So he chaired the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee starting in 2006. He had primary responsibility for raising funds and recruiting Democratic candidates in the Senate election of 2006. When he took this post, he announced he would not run for governor of New York, as many had speculated. This averted a potentially divisive gubernatorial primary election race between Schumer and Eliot Spitzer, then New York's Attorney General. I'm not going to go into the scandal that Eliot Spitzer eventually found himself in. It's an interesting story, but it's neither here nor there here. In 2006, the SEC staffers obtained a copy of Maryland's 2006 Republican Senate candidate, who is Michael Steele, by the way, who's often seen on television now on the Morning Joe show. They like to bring in Michael. He's a very friendly Republican. To them, he was very anti-Trump during the Trump elections. But anyway, a staff researcher used Steele's Social Security number to obtain his credit report from TransUnion. The report was paid for with the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee credit card issued to the researcher's supervisor. Anyway, there was an internal investigation. The Maryland Democratic Party determined the credit report it was obtained illegally and reported the incident to the U.S. attorney. The staffer resigned and pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of computer fraud and was sentenced to 150 hours of community service. The supervisor resigned from the DSCC. Under Schumer, the Democratic Party gained 6 seats in the Senate 2006 elections, defeating incumbents in each of those races and regaining Senate control for the first time since 2002. Of the closely contested races in the Senate in 2006, the Democratic Party lost only one in Tennessee. And the incoming Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, persuaded Schumer to serve another term as DSCC chair. In 2009, Schumer was succeeded. Of course, Schumer was very successful in the 2008 election when many more Democrats were elected. In 2009, for the 111th Congress, Schumer was succeeded as DSCC chair by Senator Menendez of New Jersey. The Senate Democratic Caucus elected Schumer minority leader in November 2016 when Harry Reid announced his retirement in 2015. After that, Schumer had been widely expected, to become the leader, and he did become the leader. He did so, of course, because of his fundraising success. So the important thing to note is that basically all those Wall Street contributions and successful Wall Street fundraising for Schumer and those he backed were responsible for Schumer's ascension to leadership, of the Democratic Party. Schumer did not have the seniority Dick Durbin had. So based on seniority alone and the fact that he wanted to be the leader, Dick Durbin should have been the successor. But Durbin was not nearly as successful as a fundraiser as Schumer, because Durbin didn't have the backing of Wall Street. So it was as a result of that that Schumer gained the leadership of the Democratic Party after Harry Reid retired. So I thought that point was an important one to make. But Dee, you were going to make a statement or ask a question or make a comment?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So Schumer's propensity for publicity is the subject of a running joke among many commentators. He's been called an incorrigible publicity hound. Bob Dole once quipped, quote, "The most dangerous place in Washington is between Charles Schumer and a TV camera," unquote. And Barack Obama joked that Schumer brought the press to a banquet as his, quote, loved ones, unquote. Schumer often schedules media appearances on Sundays. Some have cited his use of media as a successful way to raise a politician's profile nationally and among his constituents. They point out Schumer's been on The Daily Show 7 times. The article also points out that he was a leading consensus builder on the difficult issues of healthcare, immigration, and financial regulation. Obviously, he built consensus in such a way as to maximize the fundraising for the Democratic Party. But let us go further. On local issues, Schumer prides himself on visiting each of New York's 62 counties every year, and has done so in each of the years he served in the Senate. He's the only New York senator to have done so. He has a reputation for focusing on local issues important to average New Yorkers, not normally associated with U.S. senators, ranging from tourism to local taxes to job creation. When it was revealed, that Adidas planned to end its contract for the manufacture of NBA jerseys with American Classic Outfitters, an upstate New York apparel company, and that they were planning to outsource their production overseas, Schumer blasted the company, citing the risk to 100 workers at the plant. When it was revealed that Canon Incorporated was considering relocating from its corporate headquarters in Long Island because of a dispute over road infrastructure funding, Schumer stepped in to advocate that New York State redirect federal stimulus dollars to make the road improvements and keep the company and its jobs on Long Island. Along with his House and Senate colleagues, Schumer successfully worked to kill a Bush era privatization plan for custodial and utility workers at West Point, the military academy at West Point, rather. The plan would have called for turning over custodial and utility work to a Georgia company. In November 2017, Schumer and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand announced $1.9 million in funding for Head Start and early Head Start programs in a community action organization of Erie County. For those who don't know, Erie County is the main county in which the city of Buffalo, New York, is cited. Schumer saying the federal funding would yield, quote, real results to young students in Western New York by providing them with the resources they need to succeed both in and out of the classroom, unquote. Schumer requested the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs complete final acquisitions for two 60-acre and 77-acre parcels in Pembroke, New York, and initiate construction of a new Western New York National Veterans Cemetery, saying the completion of the cemetery would ensure, quote, Western New York's veterans will have the proper burial at a site close to the homes, families, and the very communities they dedicated their lives to defend and serve. In May 2001, Schumer and Senator John McCain introduced legislation intended to make it more difficult for makers of brand name drugs to keep cheaper generic drugs off the market. A coalition of consumer groups supported the legislation, and Schumer told reporters its enactment would reduce prescription drug costs by over 60% per prescription, in addition to saving consumers $71 billion over the next decade. In October 2001, during a press conference, Schumer stated his desire that generic ciprofloxacin be available for government use. At that time, Bayer held exclusive patent rights for its commercial product, Cipro. Schumer also said he believed the federal government had the authority to order the immediate production of generic ciprofloxacin to expand the government stockpile of the drug. In July 2002, the Senate passed a bill sponsored by Schumer and John McCain that could lower the costs of generic drugs more readily available to U.S. consumers thereby lead to savings of billions of dollars in drug costs. Okay, the legislation also attempted to prevent frivolous lawsuits by brand name uh, but, uh, drug companies claiming generic drugs infringed their patents. An identical bill was introduced in the House but did not pass. So Schumer has introduced a number of different bills uh, that seem to be in the public interest, but somehow, in spite of Schumer's fundraising power and his rising in the Senate, these bills did not get passed. FBI. In November 2001, Schumer joined fellow New York Senator Hillary Clinton to call for legislation encouraging the FBI to share information on terrorism with local and state police by removing legal barriers to such cooperation, citing reports by New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani that federal authorities did not tell city police that they were aware of Schumer, uh, did not tell city police what they were aware of. Schumer joined Patrick Leahy, he was the senator from Vermont at the time, to report that the Justice Department supported the legislation. In October 2016, after FBI Director James Comey announced the reopening of an investigation into whether Hillary Clinton and the Democratic presidential nominee mishandled classified emails during her tenure at the State Department, Schumer said he had lost confidence in Comey. No wonder. In May 2017, by the way, that was a critical thing that led to the defeat of Hillary Clinton in 2016. That wasn't, of course, the only thing. Okay, there were half a dozen things that, if they had gone right for Hillary Clinton, would probably have resulted in her victory over Donald Trump. But anyway, in May 2017, after President Donald Trump fired Comey, Schumer told reporters they were aware the FBI had been investigating whether the Trump campaign had colluded with Russia and pondered whether the investigation was, quote, getting too close to home for the president, unquote. In a Senate floor speech, Schumer called for impartial and independent investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. That, of course, was Russiagate. Announcing the Democrats had agreed Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein would not be able to appoint a special prosecutor for an investigation into the meddling by Russia, that Comey meet with the Senate, and that Rosenstein and Attorney General Jeff Sessions meet separately with senators. Uh, so Schumer was very active in trying to pursue investigations and prosecutions that would nip at Trump's heels. In January 2018, Schumer said that since the Mueller investigation began, the United States has had to endure conspiracy after conspiracy from the right wing, Republican congressmen, senators, of course, the right wing press, which acts in total cahoots, unquote, in regard to their views on the FBI, that the Republicans' efforts to discredit uh, um, investigator Mueller, quote, has now devolved into delusional, self-serving paranoia, unquote. In May, after the White House invited 2 Republicans and no Democrats to a briefing by Department of Justice officials on an FBI informant who made contact with the Trump campaign, Schumer and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi sent a letter Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Christopher A. Wray, calling for, quote, a bipartisan Gang of 8 briefing that involves congressional leadership from both chambers of Congress. About the Supreme Court, in September 2005, after George W. Bush nominated John Roberts for Chief Justice of the United States, Schumer praised Roberts' brilliance, his being, quote, a lawyer above all, unquote, and his judicial philosophy and modesty and stability, quote unquote, during the Senate Judiciary Committee's confirmation hearings for Roberts. But Schumer said Roberts' compassion and humanity was questionable and objected to the Bush administration's refusal to show documents Roberts wrote during his tenure as Deputy Solicitor General and to Roberts' refusal to answer many questions the committee asked him. So you have to wonder why, if he refused to answer many questions, the committee asked him, why did they confirm him? In June of 2018, Schumer said Roberts was demeaning the Supreme Court as it became more political, citing the court ruling in favor of anti-abortion clinics in California. Schumer said the court had affirmed a plainly discriminatory travel ban, unleashed a flood of dark, unlimited money in our politics, and has scrapped a key pillar of the Voting Rights Act, all of which was true, by the way, and thereby aligned itself with goals of what he called, quote, the hard right, unquote. In October 2005, Schumer said Bush Supreme Court nominee Harriet Miers would not get a majority either in the Judiciary Committee or the floor, that her confirmation hearings would cause her to gather either support or opposition in a way that had not been seen by any other nominee in recent memory. In May 2009, he told reporters the confirmation process for Obama's Supreme Court nominee Sonia Sotomayor would be, quote, more of a test of the Republican Party than it is of Judge Sotomayor, unquote, calling Sotomayor a, quote, mainstream justice whom Republicans had no reason to oppose. March 2016, after Obama nominated Merrick Garland to replace the deceased Antonin Scalia, Schumer called for Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley to hold hearings, quote, so America can make its own judgment as to whether Merrick Garland belongs on the court, unquote. In July 2018, it was reported Schumer had advocated that Trump nominate Garland as a way to attract bipartisan support, as opposed to nominating someone opposed to the Affordable Care Act and Roe v. Wade, who would be more controversial. In November 2016, Schumer said the Democrats would, quote, go at, unquote, President-elect Trump if he did not nominate Supreme Court justices who were mainstream, and the Republicans did not have, quote, clean hands for having blocked the Garland nomination for months, of course. In March 2017, at the edge of Senate hearings for Trump's Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch, Schumer said he would vote against confirmation and called on Democrats to join him in blocking an up or down vote on Gorsuch. In his floor speech, Schumer said if this nominee cannot earn 60 votes, a bar met by each of President Obama's nominees and George Bush's last two nominees, the answer isn't to change the rules, it's to change the nominee, unquote. The Democrats conducted the filibuster, but Republicans broke it using, quote, using the, quote, nuclear option, unquote. And Gorsuch was confirmed the next day. So the Republicans used the nuclear option in order to create the precedent that only majority vote would be needed to confirm Supreme Court justices. You would have thought that when the Democrats took control of the Congress again, they immediately would have used the nuclear option to get rid of the filibuster. But of course, as we all know, they have not. And even though they control the Senate right now, they still won't use the nuclear option to get rid of the filibuster as it applies to legislation. So the Republicans got their way by using the nuclear option, but the Democrats refused to use it, and so embrace an excuse they always have not to pass legislation the people favor. In July 2018, after Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh to replace the retiring Anthony Kennedy, Schumer said Kavanaugh should be asked direct questions about the precedent set by Roe v. Wade and other cases. Schumer noted Kavanaugh's expressed opinion on the possible incorrect decision in United States v. Nixon, and that this could mean he would not hold Trump accountable as justice. In August 21, Schumer said he was requesting documents from Kavanaugh's White House tenure be shared with the Senate, arguing that this is on August 21st of 2018, I believe. From Kavanaugh's White House tenure be shared with the Senate, arguing that, quote, withholding documents from the Senate and the American people under the bogus label of committee confidential is a dark development for the Senate, unquote. After meeting with Kavanaugh, Schumer said he had asked him whether he believed Roe v. Wade and KCV Planned Parenthood were properly decided, that Kavanaugh had not responded, and the lack of an answer, quote, should send shivers down the spine of any American who believes in reproductive freedom for women, unquote. He also said Kavanaugh had a special obligation to make his views clear due to his unique position as the only person nominated to the Supreme Court by a president who said, quote, I will only nominate someone who overturns Roe v. Wade, unquote. Schumer subsequently called on the Senate Judiciary Committee to delay Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing after former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen pled guilty to charges of bank fraud, tax fraud, and campaign finance law violations, calling the plea, quote, a game changer, unquote. At a March 2020 pro-choice rally outside the Supreme Court, Schumer said, quote, I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know it hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Roberts subsequently issued a statement calling Schumer's comments threatening, inappropriate, and dangerous. Those are all in quotes. Senator Josh Hawley called for Schumer to be censured. Uh, yeah, that was before Schumer became the majority leader, of course. On net neutrality, in November 2017, Schumer said, just as our free highway system helped to build jobs in America in the 20th century, net neutrality will help build jobs in the 21st century. Take a step back, hurts our economy, our job growth, and middle class and working people. It is a disaster. In December, however, after the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality rules, Schumer said the internet could start resembling a toll road with the highest bidders cruising along private fast lanes, quote unquote, while the rest of us inch along a single traffic choked public lane, and we could be forced to purchase internet packages, much like cable packages, paying more for popular sites, and that the resolution he was introducing would undo the effects of the vote. I don't think it did undo the effects of the vote. In January 2018, Schumer announced all 49 members of the Democratic caucus supported a resolution overturning the FCC vote on net neutrality, said congressional Republicans have the opportunity to right the administration's wrong, show the American people whose side they're on, big ISPs and major corporations, or consumers, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. In May, the Senate adopted a measure to revive Obama era internet regulations, enforcing equal treatment for all web traffic. Schumer called the vote, quote, our best chance to make sure the internet stays accessible and affordable to all America. In June, in response to the Republican controlled House not taking up a resolution by the Senate restoring net neutrality rules, Schumer said House Republican leaders gave a green light to the big ISPs to charge middle class Americans, small business owners, schools, um, um, rural Americans, and communities of color more use the internet. Okay, the committee assignments of Schumer are he's on the Committee on Rules and Administration, and he's on the Select Committee on Intelligence, but there he serves as ex officio member, in other words, not a voting member. But we have to note that he's also the majority leader of the Senate. So people are going to vote along with him as he sits on that particular committee. So he has caucus memberships. He's a member of the After School Caucus. Not sure what that does. And the Congressional Next Gen
Mm-hmm.
911 Caucus. His political positions follow. On abortion, he's pro choice. Has a 100% rating from NARAL Pro Choice America, even though he received some criticism for attending a gala in 2007 hosted by EFRAT, an organization that seeks to reduce abortion among Israeli Jews. In 2002, Schumer authored a provision to win an industry sponsored bill intended to make it hard for people to erase their debts by filing for bankruptcy. Anti abortion activists opposed the measure, claiming it restricted their ability to use bankruptcy courts to write off court fines. After the bill appeared to die in May, J. Dennis Hastert spokesman John Feary opined Schumer really was pretty obnoxious about how this provision was going to hurt people who were pro life. And that really got some of our folks ginned up. In
Mm-hmm.
response, Schumer said the provision was a compromise, honey, was a compromise with Henry Hyde and other colleagues, and it was opposed by people who did not properly read the law. After Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy retired in 2018, Schumer voiced concern about Trump's choice as replacement, believing they would try to overturn Roe v. Wade.
And they did.
He was certainly right about that, wasn't he?
Yes.
But we also have to point out that when they gained control of the Senate in 2021, and they also had control of the House, they did nothing to codify Roe v. Wade, even
Mm-hmm.
though they knew and believed that the Supreme Court justices appointed by Trump were going to overturn Roe v. Wade. So, what excuse have they?
The fact they want to use it as a campaign issue.
They wanted to use it as a campaign issue and collect money in the 2022 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
rather than doing anything about it to stop it before it happened. They could have stopped it before it happened.
Yes, they could have, but they chose the
They
money, the
chose to do
campaign
nothing.
money.
Even when the decision became public as a draft of the decision, they were not moved to get rid of the filibuster for that issue and to codify Roe v. Wade before the final decision came down from the Supreme Court. In March 2019, Schumer was one of 38 senators to sign a letter to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, warning that dairy farmers have continued to face market instability and struggling to survive the fourth year of sustained low prices, and urging his department to strongly encourage these farmers to consider the Dairy Margin Coverage Program. What about Bush administration judicial nominations? In January 2004, after President Bush renominated Charles Pickering, the Federal Appeals Court, along with 30 other nominees who had failed to win confirmation under the previous Democratic controlled Senate, Schumer stated his intent to prevent Pickering's confirmation and said the U.S. could do better. 2007, after Bush nominated former federal judge, his name is Michael Mukasey, to become Attorney General of the United States, replacing, what was Gonzalez's first name again?
Alberto?
Yes, Alberto Gonzalez, right, who had resigned. Schumer expressed support for Mukasey, despite appearing troubled by Mukasey's refusal to declare in public that waterboarding was illegal torture. Schumer announced on November 2nd that he would vote to confirm but Mr. Mukasey. He said Mukasey had assured him in a private meeting that he would enforce any law declaring waterboarding illegal, and Mukasey had told him Bush would have no legal authority to ignore such a law. The votes of Schumer and Dianne Feinstein to recommend him for confirmation allowed the confirmation to move on to the new Senate, where, of course, Mr. Mukasey was I can't remember whether he was defeated or not. Can you? Did he become Attorney General for a time, Dee? I'm not sure anyway whether he became the Attorney General for a time. On the Clinton impeachment, Schumer voted on the impeachment charges of President Bill Clinton in both houses of Congress. He was a member of the House of Representatives and a Judiciary Committee member during the December 1998 lame duck session of Congress, voting no on all counts and on the floor. In January 1999, as a newly elected member of the Senate, he also voted not guilty on the two impeachment charges. So Schumer got to vote twice in a way. Consumer issues. Schumer has given legislative attention to consumer issues. He passed legislation that required uniform disclosure information on the back of credit card applications to notify prospective cardholders of annual fees and interest rates. The standardized information is now known as the Schumer box. Schumer has also aggressively pushed to end the practice whereby customers can be charged two ATM fees, one by their own bank and one by the bank that owns the ATM, if the ATM is outside their bank's network. With Representative Nita Lowey, Schumer has been working to ban the chemical bisphenol A, also known as BPA, often found in baby bottles and plastic children's food containers. Okay, the Canadian government has already banned BPA in babies' bottles and children's products. Schumer is also seeking a ban on the use of cadmium, a carcinogen known to impair brain development in children, in toys, and children's jewelry. When companies began selling gloves, pills, inhalers, diuretics, shampoos, and other products during the 2009 swine flu scare, Schumer urged the Federal Trade Commission to open an investigation. In the end, the FTC put 10 companies on notice and identified a total of 140 scams. Schumer has championed college tuition tax credits, calling for and passing a 4,000 tuition tax credits for students as part of a host of tax credits and cuts passed to stimulate the economy in the 2009 American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, the ARRA, that was better known as the first and only stimulus bill in the Obama administration, 2009. Schumer received an A grade on the 2008 Drum Major Institute's Congressional Scorecard on Middle Class Issues. In October 2013, he announced his support for a proposal ending restrictions on shipping beer, wine, and spirits through the U.S. Postal Service, saying it will help keep local post offices open by bringing in an estimated $225 million in new revenues to the USPS and broaden the availability of beers and wines to consumers. On the death penalty, he said the death penalty would be appropriate in the case of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the perpetrator of the Boston Marathon bombing. Quote, the federal law allows the death penalty. I wrote the law in 1994 when I was head of the crime subcommittee in the House. This is just the kind of case that it should be applied to. So obviously Schumer is for the death penalty in certain cases. Okay, disaster relief. Schumer is recognized for helping to achieve the award of $700,000 in compensation from FEMA for Gowanda, New York, as a result of the devastating flood there in 2009. A flash flood devastated the village, causing 2 deaths. 4 feet of flood water swept through the village and caused much damage. Gowanda was declared both a state and federal disaster site. Of the anticipated disbursement of FEMA monies to Gowanda, Schumer said, FEMA and the state were sitting on Gowanda's money for way too long. It's about time that they made the village of Gowanda whole for the damage done in the flood. I've been advocating for this for months and months and months. I'm glad everyone came together and finally did the right thing. And there's a section on Donald Trump. I'm not going to go through that. Okay, I do want to raise some issues here. This particular Wikipedia page is very good on reporting on the things that Schumer did to improve things for the people. It is not very good when it comes to reporting on the things that Schumer failed to do, and that align more with his pattern of fundraising. First of all, he was the majority leader when the vote came. When the vote came on the minimum wage bill. The minimum wage bill was included in the American Rescue Act that was passed in early March of 2021. The House had passed through the rise in the minimum wage to $15 per hour. When the bill hit the Senate, Schumer knew the bill would encounter resistance from all the Republicans, or at least he thought it would from all the Republicans. And he also thought that there were a number of Democrats who were going to oppose the bill, especially Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. So what he did was he took the House bill and he cut the minimum wage provision from it before it hit the Senate floor. He could do that, okay, as the majority leader of the Senate. That bill had to be passed by reconciliation. In reconciliation votes, there is such a thing as a votorama, so-called, okay, votorama, where when a bill is undergoing reconciliation, there's a day or two that's given to vote for all sorts of amendments that can be proposed to a bill. So Bernie Sanders tried to get back into the bill the $15 per hour provision by proposing an amendment. Okay, the amendment, it was only necessary to get a 50 plus 1 vote majority for the amendment, but there were 8 Democrats who defected. 4 of those Democrats were absolutely in Biden's pocket, and certainly weren't going to vote against the minimum wage provision if it continued to be wrapped into the American Rescue Plan Act. But in this other context, as an amendment to that act, they were able easily to vote against it. So was John Tester and Angus King of Maine. If it was part of the American Rescue Plan, they probably would have passed it. If Schumer had left it in for a vote, then it would have been a difficult vote for Joe Manchin and for Kirsten Sinema, okay, to vote against it on grounds that they did not like the minimum wage provision, okay, in the bill. But instead of Schumer forcing them to take that particular bill and to pressure various Republicans to vote for the American Rescue Plan by putting it on the floor in that form, forcing, for example, Susan Collins to vote against it, okay, in that form, and get accused of opposing the $15 an hour minimum wage. Also forcing Lisa Murkowski to take a hard vote, okay, against that. Schumer pulled it out of the bill and put the burden on Bernie Sanders to get the amendment passed, which of course he could not do. It failed, okay, by 8 votes. So Schumer's maneuvering was responsible for not getting a floor vote from the Senate on the minimum wage bill. as part, okay, of the American Rescue Plan. Now, the politics here is more complex actually than that, because the Senate parliamentarian had come out and said that the minimum wage bill did not belong in the American Rescue Plan. And Biden said, I respect the parliamentarian. Uh, and so they developed a difficult kind of situation. Schumer did not want to have the American Rescue Plan passed, okay, in the Senate, or come to a tie vote in the Senate, where Kamala Harris would have to break the tie and vote against, okay, the American Rescue Plan. Schumer didn't want to have that go to Biden because he wanted to protect Joe Biden from possibly vetoing the bill because it had the minimum wage provision that Biden did not like. So Schumer bared a lot of the responsibility for the minimum wage bill not passing because of the way he managed that bill. All through the year, in other negotiations with Sinema and with Manchin and with other naysaying Democratic candidates, he refused to put popular versions of bills on the floor to make those senators take votes that would be tough for them. Schumer, of course, always acted over the years as a strong support for the Affordable Care Act and as an opponent, okay, of Medicare for All. He also failed to get behind the Green New Deal. This whole pattern of behavior by him is, of course, consistent with the pattern of his donor financial support. I think that's important to realize. In the area of election reform, in March 2002, as the Senate worked on a compromise to save an election reform bill that stalled due to Republicans believing it was not competitive enough against voter fraud, Schumer and Senator Ron Wyden led a successful effort in protecting an amendment allowing first-time voters to be verified with only a signature. So that was something good he did. Under equal pay, in April 2014, the U.S. Senate debated the Paycheck Fairness Protection Act, or the Paycheck Fairness Act, I should say, S-2199 in the 113th Congress, a bill aimed at addressing the gender pay gap in the United States. Republicans argued that the Democrats were attempting to use the votes on this bill and the issue of equal pay as political issues in the 2014 midterm elections. Schumer backed the measure and told reporters, quote, pay equity, that's women, that's 53% of the vote, unquote. So apparently Schumer was for pay equity. In 1987, then Representative Schumer wrote a New York Times op-ed opposing repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, titled Don't Let Banks Become Casinos, quote unquote. That was back in 1987 when he was representing the lefty district that first elected him to Congress. So he wanted Glass-Steagall back then. But in 1999, Schumer supported Congress's repeal of Glass-Steagall, saying there are many reasons for this bill, but first and foremost is to ensure that U.S. financial firms remain competitive. Since 2010, The securities and investment industry has been the largest donor to Schumer's senatorial campaign. So here we see that Schumer switched when he was a representative representing the lefty district. He was for Glass-Steagall. When he became a senator, he changed his mind and he became a senator, okay, from Wall Street. The senator we see now. Since 2010, the securities and investment industry has been the largest donor to Schumer's senatorial campaign. According to a December 14th, 2008 New York Times article on Schumer's role in Congress in the Wall Street meltdown, the crash of 2008, he embraced the industry's free market deregulatory agenda more than any Democrat in Congress, backing measures blamed for contributing to the financial crisis. A review of his record showed that he took steps to protect the industry from government oversight and tougher rules. Over the years, he helped save financial institutions billions of dollars in taxes or fees. The article claimed that Schumer succeeded in limiting efforts to reform and regulate credit rating agencies. The George W. Bush administration and the SEC had proposed. So he was more in back of the finance industry than even the Bush administration and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Charles Schumer Rob Portman Senate Bill of 2015 proposed to tax the 2.2 trillion multinational corporations holding outside the country in tax haven subsidiaries, on which 35% was already owed as a one-time tax at a rate significantly lower than the statutory corporate tax rates. In his book, released in March 2010, No One Would Listen, Bernie Madoff, whistleblower Harry Markopoulos passed along an unsourced claim that Schumer called the SEC for information about the Madoff investigation. Schumer denied this, however. In response to the American Prospect Day 1 agenda, Schumer announced a new stance on eliminating student debt in November 2020. He said, I have a proposal with Elizabeth Warren that the first 50,000 of debt be vanquished, and we believe Joe Biden can do that with the pen as opposed to legislation. Schumer was involved with legislation to address the Darfur genocide in 2009. He co-sponsored two bills calling for peace in Darfur. Both bills, S-455 and S-684, passed the Senate. He also voted for measures to help increase the efficiency of peacekeepers serving in Darfur. 2009, Schumer criticized Scotland's release of convicted Pan Am Flight 103 bomber by Abdul Basit al-Megrahi and called for the United States to impose economic sanctions on the UK if his release was tied to a massive oil deal between the United Kingdom and Libya. In April 2017, after the Shayrat missile strike, Schumer said a pinpoint, limited action to punish and hopefully deter Assad from doing this again is appropriate, while warning against the United States becoming further involved in Syria. In July 2017, Schumer voted for the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, which grouped together sanctions against Iran, Russia, and North Korea. In July 2018, after Trump criticized Germany's decision to approve a new Russian German gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea, bypassing Poland and Ukraine, Schumer and House Minority Leader Pelosi released a joint statement condemning Trump's comments uh, as an embarrassment and his behavior as another profoundly disturbing signal that the president is more loyal to President Putin and to our NATO allies. So it was not only, of course, a Russian pipeline, this was also a German pipeline. It was a joint effort by the two countries, by passing Poland and Ukraine as well. So last time I looked, one of our NATO allies, okay, was Germany. And so Trump was not in conflict with one of our NATO allies, was he? Uh, on the other hand, when we destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline, we severely damaged the German interests and the interests of all of our NATO allies in Europe because that oil was getting to them. In October 2020, Schumer called on the Trump administration to immediately suspend U.S. military aid to Azerbaijan, sent through the Pentagon's Building Partner Assistance Program. According to critics, the aid could be used in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Azerbaijan, and Armenia. He co-signed the letter stating, have been very critical of U.S. assistance to Azerbaijan given the country's human rights record and aggression in the region. Earlier this year, at Senator Menendez's request, the Government Accountability Office agreed to conduct a review of security assistance to the country to ensure that it aligns with U.S. interests. This violence indicates that it does not. There's a segment here dealing with Afghanistan. I'm not going to go through it except to say Schumer called for caution, in Afghanistan, noting the Iraqi casualties, and he was also concerned about the costs, in Afghanistan. In 2006, this next section is about his positions on China. NPR reported that Schumer and Senator Lindsey Graham were highly critical of the trade imbalance between the U.S. and China and its alleged cause of Chinese currency intervention. What China was doing with its currency is it was pegging its currency to the dollar. So in other words, it wasn't allowing its currency to float. And in those days, the dollar was a very hard currency, and in many ways it still is. And so, but China was actually preventing the value of its currency from varying either up or down, by pegging it, to the dollar. And Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer did not like that. So they have asked both the Bush and Obama administrations to find China guilty of currency manipulation under a 1988 law. Schumer and Graham have introduced legislation in three successive Congresses to impose tariffs on Chinese goods for the purpose of raising the value of the Chinese yuan. But since the Chinese were pegging the yuan, okay, to the dollar anyway. I'm not sure what this was about. In other words, did they want the value of the yuan to go up um, even further? I suppose they did. So they wanted the value of U.S. currency to decline compared to the yuan. That's what they were fighting for. Uh, Maybe they thought that would help employment uh, here in the
Here,
U.S. There were
there
lots.
were
There were
there
lots
were
of
lots
nations,
of
though,
nations
that they were
that they
putting
were
their
there.
currencies to the value of the dollar. So that point should be made. China wasn't by far the only one, okay, that was doing that, but the only one that Graham and Schumer wanted us to try to sanction for this was the Chinese, and not okay a number of other nations that were pegging their currencies okay to the dollar. Before the administration took concrete measures against China in late March of 2018, Schumer and other Democratic leaders pressed Trump to focus more on China. Schumer said China has stolen millions of jobs and millions of dollars, but administrations from both parties haven't been strong enough to fight back. To me, this is all a dodge because the way to fight back was to force our companies to relocate back to the United States. And also during this period, we were continuing to give companies tax incentives to manufacture overseas, not just in China, but in Mexico, okay, and other nations. We had been doing that for years and years and years. And to complain that other nations were manipulating their currency, and that was causing the problems, is way off the mark. What was causing the problems was that we allowed our industries to go overseas in the first place, not just allowed them, but encouraged them for years with tax incentives, okay, to do that. We never penalized the owners of those companies with higher taxes. We never tried to pressure them as disloyal to the United States. Uh, we never used any other measures to try to keep them here. But what we seemed to enjoy doing was shrinking the middle class, okay, in this country, and basically putting sanctions, okay, on American labor for many years, okay, by allowing the capitalists to export our industries, okay, to other countries. So the Iran nuclear deal, Schumer was against that. He announced his opposition to that. He planned to tell the White House and send his colleagues and the public, but the White House leaked the news during the Republican debate in what CBS News described as an apparent attempt to limit coverage. Arms control expert Jeffrey Lewis defended Schumer's decision, noting that, derided Schumer's decision, noting that Schumer was making factually incorrect claims about the amount of time in which the treaty would allow inspection of Iranian but nuclear facilities. In what The Guardian described as a shot across Schumer's bow, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said that the fellow Democrats might remember Schumer's decision when deciding whom to elect as their next majority leader. Of course, the Democrats never did that, did they? For them, the Wall Street money was much more important. Okay. On Iraq, Schumer was a supporter of the Iraq war resolution, but was very critical of President George W. Bush's strategy in the Iraq War. He suggested that a commission of ex-generals be appointed, to review it. He called the Bush administration's Middle East policy muddled, confused, and inconsistent, and said the planned meeting between Secretary of State Colin Powell and Yasser Arafat would contradict Bush's stated stand against terrorists and those harboring them. Nat Hantoff of the Village Voice wrote in November 2006 that the loquacious Schumer has been indifferent to the administration's war on the Constitution and on our laws and treaties, particularly on the issue of torture. So I'm not going to go much further with this because really time's up for tonight. But I think I've said enough to show you that the pattern of Schumer's actions, certainly since he came to the Senate, has been one of responding to Wall Street donors. Also, he does nothing to disturb any of the things the drug industry is doing. He's certainly been lately supporting without complaint the administration's very destructive foreign policy with respect to surrounding Russia and trying to bring Ukraine into NATO. And of course, the extreme amount of support we have given to Ukraine in that war, essentially blaming Russia for the war when the record is far from plain about that, and not trying to adopt a neutral position with respect to the war, trying to broker negotiations for the two sides. And also, of course, he hasn't criticized the failure of the Bush administration to back a policy of neutrality for Ukraine, which was the most logical thing to do here. The Russians obviously wanted a buffer state between themselves and the West, and that might have been a good deal for Ukraine, and it certainly would have been a good deal for us. We would be $120 billion or so heavier in our wallets. That's a distortion, of course, for various reasons, but you get my meaning. We have extended very, very heavy financial support, to Ukraine, and very heavy support, in materiel, as well. And also in, let's call it, non-formal warfare with American volunteers going over there, and all sorts of evidence that our security agencies are involved over there, as well. We have been pursuing a foreign policy which is very destructive, aimed at the destruction of Russia, as a nation. Schumer has supported that of the foreign policy. He's also supported, he's also objected to UN Security Council Resolution 2334, which condemned Israeli settlement building in the occupied Palestinian territories as a violation of international law. He criticized Obama, saying past administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have protected Israel from the vagaries of this biased institution, the UN. Unfortunately, by abstaining on UN Resolution 2334, the administration has not followed in that path. So it was not enough for Schumer that the administration abstained on Security Council Resolution 2334. For him, it was necessary for the U.S. to come out against that. In May 2017, Schumer co-sponsored the Israel Anti-Boycott Act, Senate Bill 720, which made it a federal crime punishable by a maximum sentence of 20 years imprisonment for Americans to encourage or participate in boycotts against Israel and Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories if protesting actions by the Israeli government. The bill would make it legal for U.S. states to refuse to do business with contractors that engage in boycotts, against Israel. So Schumer is very much in back of the standard policy of the U.S. and the policy of the Trump administration, really, to completely back what Israel wanted to do, in the occupied territories. And so that's perfectly consistent with his donor profile, where,
Right. He's a far right winger when it comes to Israel with the settlements.
yes, almost everybody's a far right winger, but he is a far right winger in that respect also, certainly.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm not going to go through North Korea, really, taking enough time on this. Uh, I should cover Russia, though. Schumer wrote that cooperative economic sanctions from the US, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China could topple Iran's theocratic government. So he wanted everybody to cooperate in economic sanctions against, the Iranian government. In discussing the importance of Russia's cooperation, he wrote, quote, Mr. Putin is an old-fashioned but nationalist who seeks to regain the power and greatness Russia had before the fall of the Soviet Union, unquote, he added. The anti-missile system strengthens the relationship between Eastern Europe and NATO with real troops and equipment on the ground. It mocks Mr. Putin's dream of eventually restoring Russian hegemony over Eastern Europe. On June 10th, the East European Coalition sent Schumer a letter about his article, writing, quote, as a supporter of democracy for the nations of Eastern Europe, such as, for example, Ukraine, where there's no democracy, which suffered greatly under Russian hegemony over Eastern Europe. Your suggestion these nations be used as bargaining chips in order to appease Russia is troubling, inexplicable, and unacceptable. So, by some of the East Europeans, he was criticized for being much too soft on Russia and seeking Russian support. In August 2013, after Russia granted asylum to Edward Snowden, Schumer said that Putin was behaving like a schoolyard bully, adding the relationship between the United States and Russia is more poisonous than any since the last Cold War because of all this. In December 2016, he joined John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Jack Reed in a letter to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell urging the formation of a Senate Select Committee on Cyber. Schumer said the panel would focus on Russian meddling and potential threats from other countries such as China, and Iran. So there he was, basically a Russiagate supporter. December 2016, he demanded a congressional inquiry into Russian defense meddling in U.S. affairs. By the way, we have to note here that among his major contributors from 2017 to 2022 is the defense industry. If you remember, they were third or fourth on his list.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he said about this in response to those questioning the U.S. intelligence community over its assessment, he says, quote, let me tell you, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you, unquote. Later that month, he introduced legislation to limit executive action on Russian sanctions. I'm a little confused by that. I thought he was for Russian sanctions. But anyway, in a May 2017 Senate floor speech, he called on the White House to replace unedited transcripts of the meeting between Trump and Russian officials the previous week, saying the continued confidentiality would ensure that the American people will rightly doubt if their president can handle our nation's most closely kept secrets. In July, Schumer disavowed claims that the Democratic Party considered Russia its top priority and named healthcare and economic stability for working class families as the primary concerns. Quote, obviously, Russia's in the news. Obviously, we want for Mueller to be able to pursue and our committee to be able to pursue their investigations unimpeded. Schumer spearheaded a non-binding resolution in July 2018, warning Trump not to let the Russian governments question diplomats and other officials. The resolution stated the United States should refuse to make available any current or former diplomat, civil servant, political appointee, law enforcement official, or member of the armed forces of the United States for questioning by the government of Vladimir Putin. It passed 98 to 0. Okay, I'm not going to go over the gun issue. I will go over the healthcare issue. Okay, Dee, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes after this stream is over. In March 2004, Schumer, John Corzine, Ted Kennedy, and Frank Lautenberg, former senator from New Jersey. John Corzine was also a former senator from New Jersey before he had to resign due to corruption charges. Signed a letter to President Bush urging him to instruct staff to avoid taking action against whistleblower Richard Foster after Foster spoke out on the subject of White House efforts intended to keep Congress unaware of alternative higher cost estimates for the new Medicare prescription drug program. So, in other words, when it was in the Democrats' interest, he was for protecting whistleblowers. But later on, he was not for protecting whistleblowers, in particular for protecting Julian Assange. Schumer supported Obama's health reform legislation. He voted for the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act in December 2009 and for the Health Care and Education Reconciliation Act of 2010. He did do that, but he did not support a Medicare for All alternative to those things. He didn't even support a strong public option, which would have been probably futile anyway. But the point is, he never even proposed that. In 2009, he proposed any new government-run health insurance programs follow all the standards applicable to private insurance. He did this to address fears that a public program would drive private insurers from the market. Clearly, his donors wanted him to do that, and he was obedient. In May 2017, in response to an amendment by Fred Upton to the American Health Care Act, Schumer released a statement saying the amendment leaves Americans with pre-existing conditions as vulnerable as they were before under this bill, and compared it to administering cough medicine to someone with stage 4 cancer. Schumer can be pretty trenchant from time to time and get people mad. Okay, I'm going to call a halt to this. Okay, at this point, Okay, there's lots more here if you read it. Even, okay, in addition to the examples that I cited here, that I pointed out here, it's quite clear that Schumer follows his donors to know what
Yeah.
kind of position he's going to take on uh, a particular subject. All you have to do is see what his donors want.
And that's how Democrats pretty much left the Democratic Party. They're claiming to be Democrats, but they're not standing by what Democrats, have a history of representing.
Yeah, that, okay, is right. By the way, in personal matters, Schumer and his wife, Iris Weinschau, were married on September 21st of 1980. The Schumers have two children, Jessica and Allison, both graduates of their father's alma mater, Harvard College. Jessica, his daughter Jessica, served as chief of staff and general counsel of the Council of Economic Advisors from May 2013 to August 2015. That was in the Obama administration. So he was beholden to the Obama administration for giving his daughter a very important job. His daughter Allison is a marketing manager in the New York office of Facebook. 2018, his daughter Jessica gave birth to a son, making Schumer, okay, a grandfather. So I think I'm going to end it there. I recommend everybody read this rather carefully. I think I'd like to end it here because we're running way over time. And I have another tough day coming up tomorrow for a variety of reasons. Let me see how the comments have been doing.
Well, that's it. Once you get into these people and, you just really want to pull out certain points.
Yeah,
And now, and people know where they can go to now if they want to, dig deeper.
yes. There are other places to dig deeper also. Schumer's website, which we did not get to, okay, in this broadcast, because there's so much useful stuff out of the Wikipedia. So it looks like, as a sort of a general idea of how to approach this, it's best to start off with Open Secrets, okay, and then go to Wikipedia, where you get a picture of the career of a person, and you can see more readily how they respond to their donors. Okay. So I apologize for not taking comments tonight. I didn't intend to go on so long, uh, but I'm sure I'll have a chance to pay you back tomorrow when I do the neoliberalism show, okay, for the week. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to end, okay, this broadcast. I'd like to talk to you for a couple of minutes, okay, afterwards,
Sure.
if you'll stay, okay. So I'm going to end the broadcast now.